The Maple Leaf exit interviews are in the bag, and on today's show, we're going to dissect the bomb dropping presser from general manager Kyle Dubas. All that more coming up on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the May 16th edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's your one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother from TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also a writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts from. Also, check us out on YouTube. That's Locked On Leafs on YouTube. New videos, new podcasts coming out each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make sure you're subbed up, hit the little notification bell as well so you know when we drop new content. Because guess what? Just because the Maple Leaf season's over, the podcast remains daily for the next while here. We'll still do podcasts all throughout the summer, but up until the draft, we still got daily podcasts each weekday. So today's this is going to be mainly on the exit interview of general manager Kyle Dubas because Dave, I think he dropped some bombs today. It was a little bit different than in years past. Before we get to it and we play it, just maybe an overall theme from what you heard from some of the other players today, some of the stuff you liked, some stuff you didn't like, and then we could get to Kyle Dubas.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot to dissect. There was 6 hours worth of player reveals today.
There was, so for those who are unaware of how everything kind of went down, luckily I didn't have to go down there and cover it because I had my radio show. But by doing my radio show, we were waiting on sound to come in. This stuff was supposed to happen at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. is when they were supposed to start. They did not start until like 9:50, and they trotted out Mark Giordano at like 9:48 or something like that. So he does his really quickly, a quick scrum, does an interview, and then you're waiting. Then they send out Ryan O'Reilly, and you're waiting again, and they send out Tavares, and you're waiting. This process started. It was supposed to start at 9 a.m., and they had the media wait around. It did not finish until 3:49 p.m. From 9 a.m. to about 4 o'clock is how long this entire ordeal took today. And it wasn't intended to be that long. I spoke with a lot of media members who've done this on a yearly basis, and they said it was kind of little in disarray. It didn't seem as organized as usual. We knew that Shanny wasn't speaking, so Dubas spoke by himself long after Sheldon Keefe came out and spoke by himself. All the players had long time in between coming out and speaking with the media. So overall, the sense that I got from speaking with some of the guys who were down there was it was a little more chaotic than usual. I don't know if you want to read into that or whatever, but in terms of what was actually said by the players, it was a lot of chalky answers, but overall it was kind of what I expected to hear. It's not what I wanted to hear, but there wasn't a whole lot of accountability from the players, which we do not like here on this podcast. We
Nope.
talked about it in yesterday's show, how there wasn't a whole lot of anger, I guess, after losing out, and continued talk about all the chances and looks and odd man rushes and opportunities that they had created, but no one took the bull by the horns and said, I got to be better. I did not convert. I did not finish. Austin Matthews did not come out and said, I had 0 goals. It's unacceptable. I need to be better. Talked about the chances and all the looks that they had. Congratulations. Your chance and looks got you bowing out in the second round. That was something that I thought was echoed pretty much throughout everybody, almost to the point where I don't even blame the players. At this point, it's definitely a prerogative from the organization themselves to basically say, here are your stock answers that you're going to use today. Let's not give anyone any ammunition. We're going to keep all of our own feelings and thoughts internally, and just paraded them out there. They gave a bunch of chalk stock answers, and we didn't really hear much or learn much from the players.
Yeah, I know, and it's not anything new. Those who kind of cover the team know exactly what to expect. Now, 'cause this is kind of a twofold thing because yes, the players are not going to say anything really, and you can see Mitch is kind of when you look at Mitch Marner. I was watching. I don't like to just listen to the audio. I like to see the players' body language, and he's kind of looking up. I know he's probably maybe just looking at who the reporter was asking the question, but he's also kind of looking at someone in the back. And usually there's a PR guy beside the scrum, and the Leafs, they have multiple guys, and there's one in the back. And you can't tell me Mitch Marner wasn't looking just to make sure, it's happened. I've seen it many times where PR guys, some players kind of give a little bit of a signal to the PR guy, like, okay, like we don't
Practice
want.
it.
Yeah,
Give me the last question here, and then you'll hear last question from the
yeah,
PR guy, and I think it's wrapped up quick. Yeah, that
yeah.
definitely does happen. Um,
But
it,
on top of that, you're talking about, but it's not just the body language. It was what the players said. Like, you listen to what Leon Draisaitl. I know, and I was listening also to your to Noodles talking with you on Leafs lunch about how Leon Draisaitl came out and he said, "You know what? I take responsibility." Yeah, excuse me. The guy scored 13 goals.
you lead the playoffs in scoring, Leon. But I will say, the last 4 games, he only
Yeah.
got 1 assist. I don't know how many people who weren't following very closely
Oh yeah.
would only have 1 assist in the final 4 games, and the team went 1-3 in those games, and he felt responsible that he didn't come up big for his team, and he did take responsibility. I only wish there were a couple of players on Toronto who only had one measly assist or didn't score a single goal, who also had that type of accountability in them.
Yeah. And that's what's missing with this team. Like there were so many issues what was being said today because it's just recycled answers. I call it the recycled press conference. And the worst of it all was Sheldon Keefe. When he said
Yeah,
we made strides.
progress,
Progress. That was
prog.
sorry. Progress. Progress strides, same thing.
Yeah.
Not,
I, so one of the best lines I heard today actually came from Dave Feschuk of the Toronto Star. I can't remember if he wrote this in his column, but he joined Aaron Karolnik and Carlo Koliakovo on the morning show, and when he recalled them talking about strides, and if people should be happy that they won a round, and what did that mean, he's like, eh, for how many years they won 3 games, they only won 5. He said it's not a quantum leap from 3 to 5 wins here, guys. Like, it's not as if, and I heard the same thing, like we're really close. We're right there. We're so close. Close to what? You need 16 of them bad boys to win a championship. You got 5, Sheldon. 5. You're not close to anything. Nothing. Close to absolutely nothing. You weren't right there, which is, again, is the same verbiage that we heard a year ago. I wasn't a big fan of what he had to say either. I'm with you. I thought that, I don't know, but again, to his point, like, I don't know what I expected him to say, because we don't even know what his future is going to be with this team, right? And I mean, we know that he can't really come out and say things because there's a couple of guys who aren't allowed to have their feathers ruffled on this team. We know what we're
yeah.
talking about. 34 and 16.
Yeah, no,
You know what I mean?
I think, and I'll say it's probably a little more 16 than 34. I'm sure 34 has a bit of a say of things that are said and stuff like that. But we also know how Mitch responds to certain things when asked about it. I remember just that time when he did walk back his answer, and Mitch Marner was he made it seem like, you know what, it was a little, we didn't like that. Well, but this is where I couldn't care less what Sheldon Keefe had to say. And I think people who have shown any sort of like remorse or they feel sorry for Sheldon Keefe, It's like, you know what? He's a head coach. Head coaches, like, they're the ones that are supposed to hold the players accountable. And I'm sorry, I understand you want to make sure that your relationship is half decent, but you also want the respect of your players to say the things that need to be said. Like, you know what's funny? Pete DeBoer, he's 7-0 in game sevens.
I
Did
saw
you, did you
that.
hear
So
about
Pete
that?
DeBoer and the Dallas Stars, who congratulations on to the
Yep.
conference final with a 2-1 win over the Kraken last night. They are into the conference final, and with that, yes, Pete DeBoer now 7-0 in Game Sevens. It's
Do,
incredible. He's basically Justin Williams in coach form, Mister Game
yeah.
Seven.
Do you think Pete DeBoer would ever walk back and answer like that?
Dude, not a chance. Not a chance. He's walking anything like that back. No way. No way. But I mean, also is part of the equation and
Yep.
part of the line of thinking that management and ownership and Shanahan all need to think about going forward. Is this still the guy who can lead the charge? I think he's a good coach, but is he the right guy for this group? That I'm a little less sure on that today than maybe I was 2 months ago. I'll be completely honest. I've now wavered. I think he's a good coach. Don't get me wrong. I'm just not sure he's the right coach for this group for whatever reason. Like they've got someone else to get them over the finish line. You know what I mean? Like they've made it into the red zone. Now they got to punch it into the end zone at some point here. And maybe Keefe isn't that guy. I don't know, but based on what we heard from Kyle Dubas, and we'll play the sound and play the full presser and react to it in a moment. But everything's on the table, and that includes Sheldon. That includes the core four and
Mhm.
everything in between, right? So there's a lot of questions that we still have for this team and lots that still needs to be answered over the next little bit. Really quickly before we take a break and we get into the news. There were a couple injury updates. For some reason, nobody wanted to also disclose injuries. I don't know if you caught that. Everyone just said bumps and bruises, bumps and bruises. Ilya Samsonov did say that he was dealing with a neck injury, so that was the injury designation for him. Ryan O'Reilly said he was dealing with no big injuries. I don't believe it, based on how his game kind of deteriorated as the season went on. And the other one that I really didn't believe was Austin Matthews, who said bumps and bruises. But what do you say? It was something that I've been dealing with through the regular season a little bit and into the playoffs. I think that there was more of a injury
Yeah.
there than he was leading on to believe. I mean, that guy, he didn't look right. He didn't look right. We're going to go in more detail as the weeks go on about these players, and we'll probably play a couple of the big boys and what they had to say at the year end meetings. But I just I don't agree, or I don't believe, I guess, Matthews when he says, "Oh, just bumps and bruises." I think there was something else, a little more serious than a bump and a bruise that was hindering his play, because he had no burst, just had no burst when he was out there with the puck. So I think that probably was linked to it. Okay, before we go any further, Dave, on the other side, we are going to hear from Kyle Dubas. It was a pretty wild press conference that he had today, I thought. The only one who actually dropped some truth bombs and some bombs today while speaking. So we are going to hear what Kyle Dubas had to say about his future and the future of this Maple Leafs team, and maybe what we are to expect in the coming days. But before we do any of that, let me tell you about one of today's show sponsors. It's our good friends at Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sport, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has the deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. And the Game Time guarantee means that you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You get images of your seat before you buy, so you know what exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, just 2 taps and you're set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you'll never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem Locked On NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano. I got Dave Morassutti with me. Thank you oh so very much to our everydayers who join us on the podcast. And if you're new to the show, we respect it. Thank you for giving us a shot. Hopefully you enjoy the content that you're listening to. And if you do, we would ask if you would subscribe, leave a like on the video, and maybe comment down below your thoughts on what was said today and what you think the future of the Maple Leafs should be. Because we're going to hear from the architect of the group. We're going to hear from Kyle Dubas in just a moment. I don't know about you, Dave, but I thought that this was a pretty different presser than we've seen from him these last 5 years.
Yeah, I think over the years we have seen the emotional side of Kyle Dubas really start to come out more and more. And yeah, we talk about accountability. There's no one, I think, in the Leafs organization that embodies that more than Kyle Dubas. Like, yeah, has he made excuses in the past? Of course. But he's also been the first to fall on the sword. In every single situation. He took blame for the Montreal loss. He took blame for a lot of things with this group. And it's almost like he's running out of lives are just the desire to continuously do this for him. Right?
Well, yeah, you're leading into it, but he is a pending unrestricted free agent. He does not have a contract going into next season. That was brought up within this press conference today, and there was an interesting answer that was given. Why don't we play the press conference, and then when we hear something interesting, we could kind of talk about it and break it down. This was Kyle Dubas today at the year-end presser for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. Obviously, disappointing to be here. Feel that the group had a substantial opportunity to continue on this spring, and unfortunately did not execute to the level that we would all like. And it's another hard lesson for all of us and the entire organization. With regards to my own situation, I'll just address it off the top. Had a good, long relationship here with Brendan and the owners. I'll speak to them in the coming days, but probably more importantly, speak to my wife, Shannon, and our family here tonight and tomorrow, and see where we're at as a family and how we want to proceed with everything. This has been in learning the past couple of days, it's been a very taxing year on them, and that's obviously very important to me. So we'll go through all that, and we'll all make our decisions and roll from there. But that's that situation. I'll open it up for questions.
Josh? Kyle, last year you and Brendan sat shoulder to shoulder at this table with a sort of a unity for the organization to run it back. He's not here. What, if anything, should we read into that today?
I'm responsible. So the decisions made on trades, on roster, on everything, they're on me. So I feel like I should sit and take responsibility for them. I don't need anybody else to be up and shield it with me. It's on me.
Kevin? Kyle, putting aside for a second your own situation, which matters a great deal towards the future of this organization, but what's your confidence level that the players that have been here for years, the guys we call the core, can actually get this done and win a championship in this city together?
I think that was the tone of the conversations with them today, Kevin, were very difficult, and we all collectively need to continue to raise our level, players and staff. And I think the one thing that I would say about this spring as I sit here, and obviously there's a lot that will need to be cleared in the coming stretch. I don't know what's going on here. Well, I know what's going on here, but no, I've never seen such a gymnastics amongst the media corps before. Anyway, it was impressive. Sorry. I think that, there's a different, in terms of the goal, it remains the same, Kevin, but perhaps the path needs to shift slightly. It needs to be adapted slightly, and you get in between, persistence and full belief versus being a little too staunch and rigid. And I think that's a question that I would take the time for myself and reflecting on the year and then decide on that heading into the spring towards the draft and free agency.
Pause it there, Dave.
Kyle, what's your level of belief that?
Because I think that was a very, very important line right there where he said, perhaps the path needs to shift slightly when asked if he still felt that this core four could win a championship, because that's not what he has said in the past. We can and we will. I've got belief in this group. That is what we've heard in the past. That was not what he said today. Perhaps the path needs to shift slightly. That was the first time that he's really acknowledged that this core might not be able to get it done, and there might have to be a big move made here this spring if he is the general manager of this team, which, again, the other thing that we've taken out of this a little bit was he's kind of non-committal at this point, which he'll answer to that in a little bit. But did you pick up on that as well?
Oh, I picked up on it because he was the only one that kind of alluded that there's uncertainty when it comes to this group moving forward. Not even just with himself. Like I don't know how, even if if Kyle Dubas doesn't come back, I don't know how if the next GM doesn't come in and say, you know what, this group hasn't gotten done, something needs to change, right? A lot of people outside looking in are pretty much saying that. So I think it's his realization too that, you know what, like we don't get unlimited cracks at this, and this group as a unit, the core four, whatever you want to call it, there is an expiration date, right? Like, yeah, they have contracts, but these contracts are going to expire at some point, and new deals need to be brought up and things like that. Like this was I think also not supposed to be a 7-year until we win a round and then lose again, because this was supposed to happen within, a certain time period. And I think it just gets to the point where it's like, we've had a lot of cracks at this. At some point, you keep trying to use the same formula. If the formula is not good, something has to change with it.
Yeah, and with Tavares coming in, I guess that's 5 years, and the most games they've ever won in one postseason is 5 games. That's it. They never won more than 5 games with this core, with this group. The necessary wins to win a cup is 16. They haven't even gotten to
Halfway.
6.
That means
So, yeah, they haven't gotten halfway, not even close. So, that's it is a good thing if you're one who believes that there needs to be a big change. This is the first time that it sounds like he's also kind of signaling that as well. All right, let's pick back up and listen to a couple more minutes here of Kyle Dubas.
Sheldon Keefe is the right coach next year to lead this group?
I think in what I've seen in Sheldon, and I'll just kind of go back to these playoffs, which were disappointing, but I felt, Luke, that even going back to the last series, Sheldon and his staff made adjustments which put our group in position to capitalize. I'll just, for example, use, going from game 1 to 2, the major topic was their at the Bennett line. And the coaching staff did a good job to adjust and address that. Going into game 3, if you go back and watch game 3, in the first period we had, I I think it was 5 odd man rushes based off the coaching staff's adjustments. And then game 4 and 5, we played well. It was just, we put ourselves into a really bad hole and it was too little too late. So if there weren't those adjustments happening, I would probably be a little bit more down on him. There's still, to me, has to be a full evaluation of everything. And a full and conclusive answer on that, I think to do so right now would be too hasty.
Yeah, stop one more time here, because that was one of the big questions coming out of today was, what does this mean for Sheldon Keefe? Like, there was really Sheldon Keefe. A lot of people wondering what's next with him, and obviously Kyle Dubas, who's a pending UFA, or doesn't have a contract for next year. That was very non-committal
Yeah.
on Sheldon. Not that he was, getting ready to fire him, but he said, we're going to have to look at a lot of things. He had some nice things to say, like the adjustments that were made. So it almost sounds like he's giving a backhanded compliment to Sheldon while also slapping his players in the face for not executing offensively. But it still sounded non-committal, and it's going to be an interesting conversation, I think, over the next couple days of whether or not Sheldon comes back. If you had to guess, if Kyle Dubas is the GM of this team going forward, which we still don't know, is Sheldon Keefe going to remain that coach? Gun to your head, what does your gut tell you?
No,
You don't
I don't
think
think
so?
he is. I don't think so. I think there were adjustments made, yes, but there weren't enough adjustments made, right? Because they still didn't pull it off. They still didn't get the job done, right?
Well, was it the coaching or was it the players? Like, that's where it does become an interesting decision where it's like, I don't know how much more Sheldon could have done when your players aren't executing and you only score 2 goals in the final 7 games. Like, how much of the onus really is on Sheldon? At that point, it's like the players have to shoulder most of the blame here, and does the coach deserve to get fired because of their lack of execution? Or again, do they just need a new voice? Would they benefit from another new voice?
Well, it's not, and look, like it wasn't just the Florida series because, like, you look at at the Lightning series, they were having a hard time getting offense in certain parts because they figure, okay, we got to tighten up defensively, and when they made that approach to tighten up defensively, the offense dried up, right? So it was almost like the game plan was, you know what, maybe we're gonna have to sacrifice a little bit offensively to make sure we're taking care of things on the defensive end, and like that's fine and dandy, but you still need to score goals to win games, right? Like I kept hearing about Sergei Bobrovsky and how he was like everyone was crediting Sergei Bobrovsky, but it's also like, did the team do enough to really make life hard for Sergei Bobrovsky? Were there adjustments made on that part to figure out ways to beat him? Like I didn't see the adjustments there. Like at the end of the day, yeah, he made Matthew Tkachuk was not a factor after the first few games. But you know what? There were still things that Paul Maurice did to negate what Sheldon Keefe was putting out. Frankly, the forechecking, like the Leafs had no answer for the Panthers forechecking or their physicality. And
Well, again, is
Marner,
that personnel or is that coaching?
I think that's partly.
It is in a way very much like chicken or the egg type of.
It's not like I'm not putting it all on the coaching because the players have to execute, but at the same time, like, were there adjustments made to how they do their breakouts? Did they maybe figure out a way to make sure Marner wasn't looking absolutely exhausted, right? Because not only with the 11-7, you're playing your stars more, but Marner, a guy like him, plays more because of the penalty kill roles. Like, do we need Marner to be playing 26 minutes? Are we going to get the best version of Mitch Marner doing that? I don't think so. Like personally, like, and that's something the coach can really manage, right? That's on the coaching staff to say, you know what, Marner's not looking his best. There, maybe we're pushing a little bit too much to do too much, and that's having an impact on him being able to do the things he does well. Like as much as Mitch Marner, the penalty killer, is important. Mitch Marner, the offensive weapon, is much more important for this Leafs team, right? That's where like things like that, the coaching staff needs to take a better chance to really, try to change things up there because and Sheldon Keefe made a note of saying they were done after game 3. Well, why were they done after game 3? Why was the feel like the belief wasn't there? And like you kind of saw it on Sheldon's face too, because when the coach doesn't have that belief, it translates to the players as well.
Well, and that was one other thing. Like we'll play Sheldon Keefe's audio at some point probably, but when he said we lost that series after game 2, I mean, if that was the thought in the locker room, then they had no shot at coming back and winning this series at all. If you had no belief and you felt that that loss in game 2 was where it all ended for them, no shot. They had zero shot. And I did not like hearing that comment. Let's take a quick break, actually, Dave. We got one more little show sponsor that we got to hear from. It's our good friends at Athletic Greens. And then we'll come back and listen to the rest of the Kyle Dubas press conference. But, Dave, Athletic Greens, tell us about them.
Yep. As Mike said, today's episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens AG1. Keeping up with your proper nutrition is really hard. You're busy, you're stuck at your desk, you're eating whatever you can just to get you through the day. But what if you could start your day with the ultimate nutritional insurance? With a single scoop of AG1 in a glass of water, you can do just that and absorb 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help start your day right. Athletic Greens was created when the founder experienced a ton of gut health issues and ended up on a complicated supplement routine to recover. It costs him $100 a day, which is just not sustainable. He created Athletic Greens after experiencing how difficult it was to create an optimal nutrition routine on your own, all for around just $3 a day. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health, arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition to make it easy. Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free child packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL network, and that is athleticgreens.com/NHL network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
Welcome back to the Locked On At Least podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano. I've got Dave Morassutti with me. We're reacting to GM Kyle Dubas's year-end press conference that he had today as the players did their exit meetings. We heard from the coach. We heard from the GM. Brendan Shanahan will speak at some point, we expect this week, but did not join Kyle Dubas as he typically does. Dubas coming out saying, I'm responsible. I'll answer the questions for the roster that I've built. Took the responsibility and said he didn't feel Shanahan needed to take any bullets. I respect that move, but let's continue here with what Kyle Dubas has to say.
Hey Kyle, recognizing what you said about there being a family and business aspect to your decision with your future, I'm just wondering though, do you still have it in you? Do you want to be here? Do you want to still run the Maple Leafs?
What I would say to that is that I think it requires me to have a full family discussion, Chris. So I can't. My family is a hugely important part of what I do. So for me to commit to anything without having a fuller understanding of what this year took on them is probably unfair for me to answer where I'm at. I wish I could give you more, but we haven't been able to have those full discussions yet. But it was a very hard year on them. And thus, it's tough for me to... What I would say is that I'm not going to... I definitely don't have it in me to go anywhere else. So it'll either be here or it'll be taking time to recalibrate, reflect on the seasons here. But you won't see me next week pop up elsewhere. I can't put them through that after this year.
So what we do know, I guess, is for Kyle Dubas, it's either here or it's nowhere. He's either going to remain as the Maple Leafs general manager if, I guess, the board and Shanahan wants him to come back. That also, they have a say in that. But if they want him back, he's either going to remain as the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs or he's not going to be in the game for a little bit, he said. He's probably going to end up taking some time off. And so all those rumors that you heard about him going to Calgary, him going to Pittsburgh, guessing it's not going to happen now. Because, like you said, I'm either going to be here in Toronto or taking some time off to recalibrate.
Yeah, that was a very raw answer there. Like, generally you hear about, players who kind of say, I got to talk to the family, or people say, I got to talk to the family, see where they're at. But for him to say that this was a difficult year,
Yeah.
like that's a tough one. And I'm wondering, like, what exactly led to that, him to come out and say that. Maybe it was the constant hearing about his situation, right? Like, if you're Kyle Dubas' wife and people keep asking, "Oh, I heard about this about about Kyle," like, I'm sure that is something that they have to constantly deal with. And look, they kind of understand it comes with the territory, but it does weigh on you if you have to constantly hear the same thing over and over. And, like, I'm sorry, I like we talk about it constantly too, because that's just what we have to do, right? So I wonder if that's something that played a factor into this whole thing. And, like, Kyle probably spent a lot of time to try to get this roster over the hump. Like, you saw all those deals that he made. Those deals don't happen overnight. These take months of meticulous planning,
Lots of,
calling GM,
lots of sacrifice from his
scouting,
family.
right?
Family, yeah.
Scouting missions. Like, he has to go out and scout these players himself. He's not, yeah, he can go and send out a scout, but usually GMs, when they're ready to make a deal, they're watching these players in person themselves, right? Like, that's a lot of work. And, like, understand, yes, he's getting paid a lot of money to do it, but sometimes money isn't the only motivating factor when you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life and what you want to do with your career. Family in some cases should be very important, because they got to support the fact that you're not going to be there most of the time. That's the toughest thing for anyone that works in these situations. So I do believe that's the part I didn't expect him to hear him say was that if it wasn't the Leafs, like, if he's not, if it's either Toronto or nowhere. I didn't expect him to say that.
Yeah.
I think it just also goes to show how much he wants this to be his focus. Like, he wants to see this through.
Yeah.
But he also needs to know, like, is this something that he has to continually look over his shoulder about? I think that's something that also is going to weigh on him too.
Well, yeah, and again, the team hasn't committed to him either. Like, he
No.
came into the year without a contract, right? So it's kind of twofold. I think Dubas is not committing to returning, but at the same time, it sounds like he'd like to finish the job if he's able to do so. If the family is willing to sign up for the long haul, but we'll see. All right, let's continue with Kyle Dubas and what he had to say.
Kyle, for you personally, what have the last few weeks been like? We've seen the emotional reactions, of course, to the games and everything that's been going on and getting into it with some fans in Tampa. Just how would you describe your emotions, what this has been like the last few weeks?
Well, they're all different. I'm happy to go through them because they're my own foolish, at times, actions. The Tampa one was me defending our fans and Morgan. Whether I should or shouldn't, I'll leave that to you all to decide, looking back on it. I thought it was the right thing to do in the moment. I don't know that my language was appropriate for this position, but anyway, it's Morgan Riley, it's our fans. They're passionate, obviously, and I am as well, and that was that. I think, throwing the water bottle, I was upset with our play. I didn't know Josh Cloak was running surveillance on our suite and recording everything I was saying on Saturday. But Listen, when I started down this, I'm an emotional person. And sometimes they show outwardly, and I am deeply passionate about what we do and our people here, the people I work with, the people who work for me. And so when you're in it for years at a time with people and you want them to have success, you're going to be emotional. That's me. I know some people might not like it or care for it, but that's me. And I think, I've always been that way. It's just, so I have to realize that, there's more. I could see it when it was happening in Tampa. Every single person's taking out their phone, and I'm like, oh, it's not going to go all too well. But, it's a different era even than like 9 years ago when I started, when I was in the Sioux. Everything's being recorded. The television, particularly the Canadian broadcasts, seem to really like showing the general managers, especially when they're upset or happy, which that's what the people want. Great. And, but this is me. I mean, I'd like to say I'd be able to not be that way or not be happy or angry when things don't go well, but this is me.
Matt. Kyle, when you look back at the degree to which you changed the lineup at the trade deadline, so I think it was 6 new bodies going in, Conn Smythe Trophy winner, multiple Stanley Cup rings from Luke Schenn. Do you have any moments now where you kind of wonder what is left to change, what is left to do to try and get this team to break through? And assuming you do end up back here, what is left? What would you consider adding to this team?
Well, I always think, I think the minute that you don't have any ambition or the minute that you don't have any ideas in terms of what to change that's probably the time where you have to sit and say, maybe this is not for me or it's for somebody else. In my situation here and looking at it, I think that I was worried when we brought in so many guys that it was going to be a lot in a short time, and I thought the coaching staff and in particular the players that were here did a good job of really integrating those guys quickly, and those players did a great job of integrating themselves quickly, and it was a good fit, and they performed well. We're starting to have a group of younger players that are our own, that some of them, Nick Robertson, we sent him down to the Mars at the beginning of the year. He had a really good stretch. He got hurt. He'll be back in time for training camp. Matt Nyes came in, played well during the playoffs. He'll be here. You got Bobby McMahon, who pushed throughout the year and played well when he was up and played very well for the Marlies. He got injured on Long Island, and so now he's pushing. So we're starting to get to that point where, whether it's Niemela, Villeneuve, Hervinen, Minton, another first-round pick this year, where those guys are starting to come along, and that's really where we need to get to. Adding the players each year as we need has been important, but we really need our own guys to continue to develop and jump in and come along and continue to find good value bets in free agency. Now, we'll have more cap space this year than in the past, but we'll have a lot more to address because of as you mentioned, the free agents, Matt. Yeah.
Rosie?
Kyle, one of the first words out of your mouth when you sat down was disappointment, and I think you were referring obviously to the whole equation, but I was wondering how disappointed you are in the team itself, in the players, their inability to rise to the challenge, and particularly in their second round, they crumbled.
Sure. I think, Rosie, when you can't, before the playoffs, one of the things, and I find in this position, you can't, the pessimistic things that enter into your mind, you're so focused on what's the day ahead, but in this, like when I sit here, it's what's going to happen if these different things happen, these different scenarios. And one of the things that I had lurking was, the narrative around the team, which I have always, and we've had it in these discussions here, have always disliked a lot, was like, well, you just need to win a round. Is it a success if you win a round? And I never viewed it as such. I've always viewed it as we're trying to win 4, and we're trying to win the Stanley Cup, and the team, I believe, is capable of that. And it's easy to say, well, why don't they do it? Which is what the question is, and that's when disappointment happens. So yes, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in the fact that we only scored 2 goals a game, I think for the last 7 games in a row. And we have to find a way to convert on those chances, and we have to find a way to build in different offensive principles that can allow us to produce more at those key moments. I think that it's interesting watching the games that there's, I think the Western, I don't, this is just my feeling, but in the Western Conference, the scoring seems to be more free-flowing. In our games in particular, it seems to have been very tight and close. I don't know whether that bears out across the whole thing or not. But we're going to be in this division, in this conference we're not moving from the East, so we need to find, if that's the way it's going to be, we have to find better ways. And so, yes, there's disappointment in all of it, the inability to get past the first round and then be ready to roll come the second, and inability to score throughout, and various different matters. I think that's the best word I would use.
Last question, Pierre.
Can I go back to the answer you gave to Chris about your future, knowing that you're not in a position today to give us a clear answer, but I just want to be precise on this. You're saying that if you're either going to be Leafs GM again, or you may take time away from the game. Like, you don't see yourself taking any news with other organizations?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And the second question is, you've been steadfast, certainly over the last few years, that not wanting to move any of your top players, or believe that you're the core of this team. Are you open to perhaps trading one of those top players this summer if you continue on as GM?
Yeah, I would say, Pierre, that I'm very, the answer to this gets construed in very different ways. So the answer that I would give is this spring and summer through to next October, am interested in doing anything that we, after a very thorough evaluation, because if you're going to do something like that, you got to bet it's got to be very thoroughly done, which I think the team we just played serves as a great template for. They won the President's Trophy. They lost in the second round. They were disappointed. They get to the summer and they trade 2 of their core guys for a great younger player, and that's a big move. But I don't think it was hastily done. It wasn't until I think it was late July, a Friday night, late July, that they make the move. So the way I would answer it is, I would consider anything with our group here that would allow us a better chance to win the Stanley Cup. So that I would take nothing off the table at all. And I think everything would have to be considered with regards to anything to do with the Leafs.
I would take nothing off the table at all. That was a mic drop. That was a pretty solid mic drop from Kyle Dubas. If he is the general manager, obviously, he doubled down and, still said he's not ready to say whether or not he's returning yet. He needs a contract offer from the team and from ownership, clearly. But if he does come back, it does sound as if he's open to making the seismic change that a lot of us have asked for a couple of years now. It looks like he's finally willing to budge off of the belief of that core 4.
It's interesting because, yeah, as you said, like, for somebody who was talking about whether he wasn't sure if he was coming back, he made it sound like, the template was there a little bit, right? And so, like,
two things.
Mhm.
One, I think it's something that he probably is always thinking about.
Yep.
And 2, it could also be like a negotiation tactic to try and get
1,000%. Yeah. No. Like, that was the other thing I meant to mention. It's good you brought this up. Like, because he hasn't signed a deal yet, and he's making it seem like he hasn't like, we know that he's received offers. Like, he's probably received offers, just not fully to what he wants. This is a perfect negotiating tactic. Like, I know sometimes organizations don't like when people negotiate through the media, but we know what the Toronto media can do for negotiating. Just to ask some of those players that have kind of taken Kyle to the wood chipper a little bit there to get a few extra bucks in their deals, right? Like, to player, like, there's benefits to doing that, and there's obviously also, disadvantages to doing that as well. But I think when he mentions Florida, and he was very careful of how he mentions it, because he didn't make it seem like, you know what, Florida, they were disappointed, so they made a change. Like, no. This was something that developed over time. It wasn't a hasty move. Like, they didn't just decide we're going to trade these two players. We're just going to trade Huberdeau and Weegar. Doesn't matter what we get from them. No. We're going to trade Huberdeau and Weegar, and we're going to get a better, younger player that's going to have a big impact in our lineup. And that, I think, is like a little bit of a message from Kyle Dubas, say, if I am going to trade a core member of this team, don't think I'm just going to trade them away like everybody is. Like, a lot of Leaf fans are kind of throwing out there, like, just trade Mitch Marner. Well, if you're going to trade Mitch Marner, you're not going to win the trade probably, but you're going to make sure you get something tangible that's not going to set this team back. No, they want to make sure they're getting something that's going to help and improve this team.
Absolutely. He's not gonna, he's not gonna be taken to the woodshed by any of these GMs. He's gonna make a deal that he think makes sense for his team. I'll say this though about the Florida trade. And we can go back and go watch the Locked On Leafs podcast when that trade went down. Ain't nobody saying that Florida won that deal. They gave up Huberdeau, who's coming off a 115-point season, Mackenzie Weegar, who's a top pairing defenseman, and a first-round pick for Matt Tkachuk. Nobody was saying, wow, what a steal that Florida got. Everyone thought that Florida overpaid and that Calgary won the deal. So it wasn't that, they won the trade right away, but it turned out to be the right player to add to the mix, right?
So
And that's where I'm looking at, like, if they do move on from one of these guys, are you going to get the best player in the deal? No, but maybe you get the right player in return that kind of helps the minutia of the team and allows this team to take that next step. There's not many guys on the planet who are as good as Mitch Marner. Let's face it. He's a top 15 player in the world. So, and the one of those guys are on your team. So there's like 13 other dudes. How many of those people are going to be moved this summer? Probably none of them. So you're going to get someone who's better than Mitch Marner? Probably not. But can you get somebody who brings a different element to this team that could bring this group together and end up leading to more success? I think that might be possible to do.
Yeah, two things about, and I remember at the time when we were recording it, the reason why we liked the trade so much for Calgary is because Tkachuk basically said, trade me because I'm not sticking around. So we said that they did the best that they could in the situation, and they obviously did get good assets back for Tkachuk.
We got an MVP candidate.
Yeah, exactly.
MVP. I know, in hindsight, Huberdeau had a terrible season. Weegar is still a top pair guy. Like, that guy's lighted up at the World Championships right now.
Yeah.
But Huberdeau coming off 115 points and an MVP season. Like, I think he finished third in MVP voting, I want to say.
I think it was, yeah.
Like, he was top 5 for sure. That was a seismic return that they got for Matt Tkachuk, who forced their hand. And all of a sudden, it turned out to be the right deal for Florida. The right mix. It all worked. They also made a coaching change. I will also note that.
Yes, exactly, right? And I think the other part too is Kyle Dubas saying, Florida got a younger player. And he mentioned not only getting the internal growth from players within the Leaf system, which if you're looking at
younger though, how much younger is Huberdeau? When was he drafted? 2011, 2012?
Yeah, he was Huberdeau is 29. And Tkachuk is the same age as Matthews.
Okay, so 29. Yeah, so about
4 years.
4 years younger, 3-4 years younger.
Yeah, right. And obviously not just a younger player, but a different style of player too.
Yeah, obviously.
I think that's somewhat of a model that he definitely wants. Like Dubas, if he's going to make a deal like that, he's not going to go out and get an older player. Like, I don't like this team needs to get younger, a little bit younger, play with a little more pace. And how do you do that? You bring in some younger players to do that, right? You look at you look at the Stanley Cup playoffs. We're bringing up the Dallas Stars.
I do need to also just make
Mhm.
sure that we make this distinguishment. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when you say
Yeah.
younger player, you don't mean prospects. You
No.
mean a solid foundational
Yeah.
piece, but young player, like a young 22, 23, 24 year
Yeah.
old player who's going to be hopefully a 70 to 80 point guy.
Yeah. Right. Like, I'm not saying you go out and get a 20-year-old second round pick. Like, no, you're gonna get somebody who's got some NHL games under their belt. You have an idea of where they're kind of going in the
Or a
NHL.
top pair defenseman, by the way, also I think would be a solid.
It doesn't necessarily, and then the other thing too is it doesn't necessarily mean you got to add somebody up front. The blue line, I think, needs more of that youth infusion more than
Yeah,
anything else. Because you look at what just happened with the Dallas Stars. I'm bringing them up because they've kind of done this the right way. Miro Heiskanen played like 31 minutes in that game 7,
stud.
right? Now, are you going to trade one of those core guys to get a stud defenseman? You could certainly try. I don't think many teams are going to really offer that up right now, but it just goes to show the elements that this team is missing. You can go out and try to trade for those if another team needs something that the Leafs have. It's going to be very tough, and I think what Kyle Dubas is saying is going to take time. He's certainly right. It is not something that's going to happen right now because I did not expect Matthew Tkachuk to be traded from
Well,
Calgary.
I,
It
I'll
kind of
say
just happened.
this. I will say this. Yes, it will take time, but there is kind of a date that is circled on the calendar that does have significance. Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews both have a no movement clause that kicks in, right? That'll kick in on July 1st. And I believe Nylander also has a 10-team no trade as well. So
Yes.
July 1st is kind of a timeline where you're thinking a deal could get done before then, if a deal is going to happen. That would be the easiest time to make that move, I would say. But who knows, man? Who knows what happens with this team? Is the GM going to remain? Is the coach going to remain? Which of these core 4 guys are going to go? I do not know. But the best part about it, Dave, we've got about 6 weeks to ponder that exact question and talk about it here on the show. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms. Receive daily Leafs content Monday through Friday. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. Go ahead, smash that like button. Leave a comment down below on YouTube. What do you think they should do with the core 4? Who leaves? Does Dubas stay? Does Keefe stay? Do they both go? One go? If you were Brendan Shanahan, what moves or I guess just part of Leafs Nation, what moves do you want to see the Toronto Maple Leafs do this offseason? Let us know in the comment section down below. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. We'll do some more reacting to what people had to say. And we'll kind of put a bow and recap the playoffs as well. We're going to be doing some grades, some tiers of how the Maple Leafs did through the playoffs. So all that coming up this week and next. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.